In today's short rant, I want to talk about Russia's nuclear saber rattling, along with some ideas about escalation and proxy war. So, as we look at what's going on, quick bottom line up front, Russia's been demonstrating threatening nuclear options, right? Testing new missiles, talking about how it would be so unfortunate if this happened. No one wants nuclear war, but, right? And so they've been threatening, and bringing this specter up. And this brings up the concept of escalation, right? And with escalation, we have the idea of there being some kind of rungs of a ladder, right? That conflict has various levels of intensity. There's some kind of threshold between each one, and you cross that threshold, threatening a high or threaten to cross the threshold and take the conflict to a higher level. And so we have this, generally the idea of an escalation ladder is that you threaten going to a higher rung when you can't win on a lower one, right? So if you're going to lose a large-scale conventional war, and this was NATO's problem in the 70s and early 80s, that they thought that the Soviet Union could overwhelm them with conventional forces, so they wanted to be able to threaten to go to a limited nuclear war, and so we put Pershing missiles in Europe, right, and said, well, they're here, and if you attack and we're going to lose them, we'll be going to use them or lose them. So we were trying to make the threat to go to a next level where we felt we could fight better, we're more evenly matched. So this is presumably where the Russians are today, where they have some concerns. And the thing as I look at it, right, NATO is helping out Ukraine. And so we have Russia's complaining about a proxy war, and it's like, well, this is what this is becoming. It didn't start out that way, but as you're a threat to Europe, increasingly Ukraine is becoming a proxy war where we are supporting that conflict to not have to fight another one. But it seems to me Russia's threatening two rungs above, right? And so where the United States and NATO are, which seems to me to be kind of counterproductive. Are you going to really stop the proxy war by threatening two rungs above? Because there's a whole nother level of warfare in there where NATO would do very well, right, in a large-scale conventional war, especially given the weakness that the Russian conventional military has shown. NATO would slaughter these guys, right? If the Ukrainians have got most of them combat power pinned down, F-35 swarming in, believe me, if this was the 19th century, NATO would be popping champagne corks in St. Petersburg by now. But we don't play that way on our side. But this gets the question, are we all on the same ladder? Do we understand what's going on? So that's my quick bottom line up front. To take a deeper dive in this, there was an interesting article at War on the Rocks about escalation management, nuclear employment in Russian military strategy by Kaufman and Fink, right? And so you can go to War on the Rocks and look it up. And they talk about the Russian concept of how to use deterrence, the idea that Russia is more comfortable with the idea of escalating, of a limited use of they want to have the fear that they can escalate, and so they're more willing to demonstrate, to talk about, and this is perhaps what we're seeing. They are way more willing to talk about this stuff and treat it as if it's not unthinkable, as if it's likely to occur. And this is where I think some of the concern comes from Western intelligence, who studies Russia. And, Russia thinks that there can be the use of nuclear capabilities along with conventional ones to threaten this deterrence, and that they don't see the two as being separate. And in the article, they talk about, this is not a universally accepted concept in the Russian military. Everyone's not happy about this. But the line that stuck out to me, or part of one that the authors wrote, is that this view of mixing the conventional and nuclear capability is an establishment's answers to wicked problems in the context of a great power conflict, which have no easy or ideal solutions. And, this was written in 2020, in June of 2020. And, wicked problems? Yes, these guys have wicked problems, and they have just made themselves worse. And so I kind of say that, look, this is Russia's problem. They're not able, it's increasingly obvious they are not able to compete at the conventional level, even with Ukraine. They're on a level playing field with Ukraine. With NATO, they would be dominated, right? They would be totally owned by NATO air power, and not to mention competent ground forces. So their problem is that they've got hypersonic missiles, they've got nuclear, they have more nuclear weapons, right? So they kind of feel they do have parity at that level. And so they're trying, this is what they've got. They've got a hammer, right? Everything looks like a nail, maybe but the wicked problems they're trying to solve. So just quickly, in the article, the authors give us this model of escalation. And so we have in peacetime what folks do, right, demonstrating capabilities. And so the Russians have this idea that you have to do things during peacetime. Then, and so according to the authors, this is the way the Russians see it, right, that there's local war, regional war, large-scale war. Where are we? Are we local or regional yet? I don't know. Maybe more local. And notice threat to use nuclear weapons is part of their concept for a local war, along with grouped use of precision strike, right? And so we've got this idea of, that they are trying to do that, although they're not doing very well at it. But they're threatening to do it. At regional war, what would regional war be? Well, if we think that, well, maybe that would be if NATO intervened on Ukraine's part, no fly zones, or actually sending troops in, doing, some more, a focus there on the U.S. intervening in Ukraine. That maybe is regional war. Although, here's the thing, and this is an issue. Are these categories natural, objective, or are they contrived and understood as Russia, as, this is their sheet of music, and therefore, this is their subjective view of the world. Is it the intersubjective view? Is it shared by NATO, right? This is a big question. But nevertheless, large-scale war presumably would be, like I said, trying to get St. Petersburg, right? What would have happened in the 19th century. Believe me, in the 19th century, if these guys had committed so much power and were bogged down in a war in Ukraine, right, we'd be swarming through getting a buffer zone for our Estonian allies, right? And probably, like I say, taking over St. Petersburg. But we don't think that way. There's a why. Why would we do that? That would be crazy. It would be creating more problems. You don't conquer territory anymore. There's no point in it, right? Back in the day, you took territory because it was great to be king and to have resources under you. And now it's like, well, if we took it, we just have to govern it, right? That would be a pain in the butt. Nevertheless, there's a little digression there, but as we look at them talking about regional war, they're starting to say, hey, they would, have demonstrative use of strategic nuclear forces, or NSNW, right? The NSNW is non-strategic nuclear weapons, right? And this is the idea of, that we're going to threaten that higher level, right? So then we have large-scale war, single-grouped use of nuclear weapons. And so, we see the Russian concept is to shoot this stuff through as a matter of course, and a matter of doctrine. And who knows, maybe they listen to their doctrine. We often don't on the Western side. But and as we look at what's going on, the questions I'm going to leave this with are, one, this big question of, hey, are we on the same sheet of music? Does NATO see it this way? Does NATO see, would NATO see a one-time use of nuclear weapons as being okay and just a demonstration, or would it be, okay, it's on, and that's problematic? And is NATO, the United States in particular, but remember, there are other nuclear members of NATO, but, is Russia on the same sheet of music? And so at one level, I'd say, look, they're doing this saber rattling. That's doctrine for them. So maybe don't make such a big deal out of it. This is how they think it works. They're trying to, keep us deterred from going to higher levels of conflict, which, by the way, we appear to be not intending to do anyway, right? We, from the beginning, said, well, we're not crossing that line. And there is a level between the more general use of nuclear weapons and an escalation on NATO's part. So even if we went over the line, they're a couple rungs up. But certainly the threats are there. They're thinking about it. And at another level of this, so there's like, don't get freaked out. Understand where they're coming from. The flip side of that is, do they understand where we're coming from? And supposedly Fiona Hill has said that the problem we have with Putin is not that we don't understand Putin, but that Putin doesn't understand us. Perhaps it's true. But, we're seeing miscalculations, right? And so my thought here is the Russians have this idea, okay, we're going to threaten use, and we're going to weave the threat of higher levels of escalation into this fighting at lower levels to keep a lid on things, without considering, well, what do those threats do? How do your threats, your invocation of the possibility of things escalating into nuclear conflict as a result of Ukraine, affect Finland and Sweden's decision whether to join NATO? Right? Are we in fact seeing, are they making us just more committed to fighting the proxy war? Like, yes, we've got to keep Ukraine in the fight, because if it goes downhill, we could get drawn into a bigger problem. So yes, let's keep the weapons flowing to them. Yes, no, we're not going to do a no-fly zone, but they're going to get MiG-29 somehow. You see what I'm saying? Is that this could be just another Russian miscalculation in backlash, right? That they think they are cowing us, and maybe they are preventing escalation, but they're keeping the commitment to other activities at lower levels and stoking it, right? Because the big problem with the democracy is it has to be motivated. It has to be united. The Achilles heel of a democracy and coalition of democracies is the need for political consensus. And the more you saber rattle, the more you unify those guys. So that's my short rant for the day. Thank you for listening to my short rant. I'm Dr. Dave Hayes, and though I teach at Troy University, this video is my own work. Troy University has neither approved nor reviewed the content, so there. And if you want to follow me on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, please feel free. And if you're wondering who would employ a guy like this, or maybe you'd love to be a student, it's not an ad, but I would love to have more students. Feel free to check us out at www.troy.edu. And we're going to end up finishing off listening to Tonight at 8 by Shane Ivers.